Hello and welcome to the Tuesday, September 22nd meeting of the Finance Committee. Thank you for joining us this evening. Pursuant to the Governor's order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Laws, Chapter 30A, Paragraph 20, as well as the Select Board's emergency order dated March 16th, 2020, the Finance Committee will be using remote participation for this meeting. The audio of this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the town's webpage within 24 hours in accordance with the Governor's emergency action requirement of keeping the public informed of actions during this meeting. I would ask that all participants remotely attending this meeting please state your name for identification purposes each time you speak throughout the meeting. At this time, I will take a roll call of attendance. Ms. Zemer.
Here.
Mr. Maxwell.
Here.
Ms. Nersessian.
Here.
Mr. Alfred.
Here.
Mr. Murphy.
Here.
Mr. Whitaker.
Present.
And I am, of course, present, so we are now in order. First order of business is the approval of two sets of minutes from September 8th and September 15th. I did want to point out that I found in the September 8th minutes two very minor corrections. One was that Mark had written that the town administrator had spoken about the future, and he capitalized spoke, and I said, don't even put that in. You saw my correction. I sent this to Mark already, but I just said, change that sentence to say the town administrator spoke about the 5-year capital plan, because that saying he spoke about the future is really kind of irrelevant to the minutes. And the other thing was later on, there's a thing about the word where we talk about the COVID update and the counting of college students. We left out omitted the word in. So it said some who are college instead of are in college. So minor, I wouldn't say typos, but minor just clarifications there. So if everybody's fine with those two, I'll entertain, and the other set of minutes, I'll entertain a motion to approve them both as amended.
Second.
Do I have a second? Okay, thank you. Okay, then let's proceed to a vote. Ms. Zemer.
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell.
Aye.
Ms. Nersessian.
Sorry about that. Aye.
Okay, Mr. Alfred.
Yep.
Mr. Murphy.
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker.
Yes.
And I vote yes. Okay, those minutes are approved. So next up, first of all, before we move on, do we have any other administrative matters that anybody needs to bring up?
No.
I don't believe there are any, so let's move forward. Okay, updates from the town administrator. Travis, you're on.
Okay, so I also am reading this. I don't want to be redundant. I have some 21 budget updates, which I see under number 5, and I have some special town meeting information, which I see under number 6. Do you want me to wait? Okay, so
Yeah,
I have
wait on that. We'll
I have
cover
one thing then that sort of doesn't fall under those two would be on the healthcare side, the IAC and PEC have now each had one meeting when it comes to healthcare, looking at FY22 and beyond. The healthcare consultant who's been brought in, her name is it's Sue Shalou. Sorry, I was thinking the other Sue, and then I couldn't think of it. Sue Shalou from Cook & Company. So she did our loss ratio based on the last 3 years within the West Suburban Health Group. Sitting down with the PEC, we have now decided to send her with that loss ratio to get quotes from other carriers, and then the PEC will meet again. So that whole process is in place and is moving along. So Sue has done some of the data collection and now is sort of seeing where that places us on the market. So that's moving along. Just to sort of give you a time frame. Based on the current PEC agreement, the reason we sat down and met with the PEC was that it said we would do so in the beginning of September. If the decision were to be made to leave the West Suburban Health Group, we are looking at a time frame to notify them within December to not get penalized. There are penalties in place if we were to not hit that deadline but want to leave. So in the next 2 months or so, there's going to be quite a bit of decision making that needs to be happening if that is the course of action. I would say, just generally speaking, the update from Sue to the group was it would probably not be wise for this town, based on its size, to go direct with a carrier. You probably want to be in a group. If you're not in the West Suburban Group, there are other options, the GIC, Maya, or other groups such as the West Suburban Health Group or Nashua. There's a number of those type of consortiums.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a recommendation that she made. And one of the, so she will be essentially costing out other groups and bringing that information back. I don't have anything to report on where we stand with it. But that I just wanted to give you a sort of time frame on that. That's obviously not within the 21 or the warrant, but it's sort of an update.
Yeah, and a quick question on that, Travis, which is if we, in a sense, there's no rush in the sense that we always have this option to opt out at any, next year if we decide we don't have enough time. It would invalidate some of the data, of course, but the question I have is, are we looking at some of these other groups in terms of governance, right? One of the big kind of problems that we've had, or at least that my opinion is with West Suburban, is that the people making the decisions are covered by the insurance themselves. And so as a result, they tend to make self-interested decisions and not decisions that are necessarily in the best interests of the member towns. And that's one thing I would want to make, if we're looking at other groups, I'd like to, whether the consultant does it or you do it or somehow we get this information, just understand how each of these groups are governed and how, we don't want to get into a situation where we switch groups and then we're in the same scenario of hey, we don't want to consider healthcare efficiencies because we don't like them,
Just to be clear, Ken is not saying that any member of the Holliston employees who've been members have done that. In fact, probably the other way. It's just all the other.
And that is 100% accurate. I'm not, our representation, I think, has always put the town's interest first.
No, and you shared that you think highly of Mary representing the town there. So I understand where you're coming from. And I only smirk because I've been in the GIC and governance within the GIC is one of the things that people are sort of cautioned about. They just changed leadership and they're going out for a big procurement next year. So while I was in the GIC, for example, they decided that they were going to, sort of limit their offerings. They were going to remove the biggest plans that everybody was in, Tufts Navigator, and all these different things. And then because of the governance structure, they got overturned by the legislature, essentially. So I was just chuckling because of that. It's a point well taken. If we're going to, get ourselves into a different group, we need to be comfortable with the setting, certainly. The idea being in those groups, though, like for Maya, for example, or the GIC, is that, unlike if we're direct with a carrier, if we have a bad year and we're direct with a carrier, they lose $1 million on us in FY22 and FY23, they make up $1 million, right? And we have less cost certainty on a budgetary basis. With a Maya, right? You have to be comfortable with the governance. The same thing with the GIC, West Suburban, any of the groups. At the same point, you're protected from some of those swings. They're going to pool your largest incidents, right? So they're going to take anything over 75,000. They're going to pool them. You're going to get protected from year to year swings, and those are the types of things that people need to be comfortable with. At the same point, the GIC currently offers the same things that the West Suburban group offers, right? So you have lots of options. Maya only offers Blue Cross Blue Shield, but offers the same type of plans that we have. And so all those things, and the PEC is going to play a big role in that. We want to make sure everybody's comfortable, but that's sort of where we are right now. Is this person that we've hired is doing all of the data collection, and now they need to bring back sort of what our options are.
Okay. I have two questions.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm just, by the way, I'm going to step off camera for a second, but go ahead, I'm listening.
Okay. The two questions are, one, what was Keefe doing? Because I remember Keefe told us that they saved a lot of money by switching the way that they did the health insurance. And then two, is any of this subject to collective bargaining? Does it have to go back to the unions for negotiation if we switch insurance?
So I'm not sure what Keefe, I believe Keefe left West Suburban, but we did, before we hired Sue, we asked a number of people who'd recently been through a procurement, who they used, and they recommended a consultant. We reached out to 6 and we got 4 responses, and we ended up with Sue from Cook & Company. I can look into what Keefe did. I believe they did change their carrier, so we can look at them. When it comes to the question of collective bargaining, the answer is a complicated no, and I'll discuss in a second when we go over the police contract in the 21 update. But essentially, all of our union contracts just say that we will offer insurance. They don't specify any significantly greater detail than that. At the same point, under MGL, we set up this PEC group, and they do have quite a bit of, sort of influence on the process of selection. And then at the end of the day, the way that the PEC agreement is written is that the select board is going to make a decision. So, they're at the table, I guess I would say, but this is not a collective bargaining process.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on that? Okay, go ahead, Dan. Your hand up.
Just a quick, how does our cost for the plan compare to if they went onto the state website, through the state site and picked a similar plan? Have we ever looked at that? I'm just curious. What's that?
So
we would, is that what you're talking about, Dan?
The mass, whatever the mass.
Like the connector?
Yeah.
Oh, you mean
Yeah.
that? Okay.
So there's a number of issues with that. When that first came out, I think people looked at it. At the end of the day, if we were to not offer a plan that was competitive and people ended up going to the connector because it was something that we weren't offering, one, I'm not entirely sure of the way it all shook out if they'd be eligible to get onto those, or if they were, we would probably get penalized to the point where it is not worth it for us.
Yeah.
Okay. I forgot about the penalty. I was more saying if that cost was cheaper than we offer, to pay, pay a almost reimburse. There's some formula where we still essentially paid for it. It was just that they went through their. Okay. I forgot that there was
I would say just let's let Travis.
I just want to make sure we're looking under every rock, a different opportunity. So.
Absolutely.
The goal here is to, in my mind, is to get better insurance for the money for our staff, right?
Right. No, that's why I was asking you. Similar.
It's like I think I want to see if we can get better insurance, right? That benefits them as well as town.
Right.
Great.
So I think everything else would be under different line items here on your agenda.
Okay. So so then if we're done with that, then let's proceed on to the next thing, which are liaison updates. There was no, I'll save Michelle the trouble of saying we didn't meet with the budget subcommittee last week, so there are no real updates from them. Obviously, they've been tied up with school reopening, so there's nothing there. Anybody, before I get to Tina on the select board, do we have anybody from the finance committee who has any liaison updates from their liaison assignments?
DPW. DPW with the water main or water replacement treatment plant. They're proposing an override of $1 million. It's going to cost us additional. So
hold it. Okay, you confused two issues there, right? There's already borrowing authority approved.
Correct. So it's an additional change order of about $1 million. So at least
override is not the right word.
Yeah, I misspoke.
That's exactly why I was bringing that up.
I misspoke. So yeah, there's more detail to come. They're hashing it out over the select board, but we're notified, Michelle and myself, of additional $1 million is what they're forecasting. They have 95% of the plan done. And based on that, there's some additional costs for different reasons, including steel with our tariffs. But yeah.
But wait, I thought that the foreigners, the foreign companies were paying that tariff.
Yeah, well, we won't go there.
So can we use CARES money for that then, since,
Yeah. So, and then we have to put a bathroom in the place and then put septic because we have a bathroom. So all these different additional costs that weren't originally planned.
How was that?
Okay. That's exactly what I was going to say. How was that missed? Because we had a supposedly professional company give us a...
Well, the other places don't have bathrooms, I was told. So they did the plan based on the other treatment plants. So when we had a building inspector come over, he said, you need a bathroom. So
why do you need a bathroom in a treatment? I'd like to understand that.
I'll leave that up to Travis if he's
Can you
aware.
just open a hatch?
It is a, so yeah, this was a point of contention. And we're seeking a waiver at the moment through the state. So our other stations that are similar to this, quote unquote, unmanned stations don't have bathrooms. The building inspector took a look at the plans, said that it needs a bathroom. That was added to the design. The waiver, I believe, is seeking to make it so that we can just have one unisex bathroom and not a men's and women's. I don't think it's seeking a waiver to not have a bathroom at all. I don't think that's a possibility at this point, but I could be mistaken on that. So there's still some flexibility when it comes to, we don't know exactly what the state's going to come back with on that. Additionally, some of the stuff that came out. So that's the building component. That our assumption when this was originally proposed at 8.375 did not include a bathroom. That was a component that came out through the planning process. And then there's a couple things from DEP that weren't in, lining a lagoon, multiple lagoons outside of the facility. So all of those things. And then, the majority of, so 600,000+ of the million is the change in the construction cost estimates from when this was, sort of pitched in 2018 to now, essentially projecting to when this will be under construction in the middle of 22. If we stay on the schedule that we're on.
Okay, Sue, you had some comment?
I was just trying to understand, we hired someone to give us a plan and they missed the bathroom. Is this a new rule?
I think the point of contention comes in with, it was our own building inspector who said that it was necessary. I think the question is, if that was a change in regulation, I'd have to take a look. The actual cost, I sent this out on Friday. This was one of the second page of Sean's write-up on the $1 million, sort of had the breakout. And yeah, I could look into sort of, is it an actual change in regulation, or the fact that we had a change in building inspectors between the last one of these that we built and this one that's saying that we need a bathroom.
Right.
But is it an external consultant that missed it, is my question, Travis. And I'd like to dig into that a little bit more fully, because I would be concerned if the regulation was there and we hired someone and they missed it.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going with it too, is my concern isn't that, we have to do it. It's that you supposedly, we purportedly hire an expert to give us, or, you have an expert give you a design plan. And if the expert doesn't understand fundamentally that this is required from day one, that's troublesome. And by the way, this gets back to what you've already heard. I know you weren't here when that was done, but this gets back to a lot of what you hear us say when we talk about contracts and these types of things about being, in the private sector, if you hired an expert to do something like this and they missed something that obvious, A, you would never hire them again, and B, there would probably be some remediation for the fact that they missed something they were required to have, right?
That's what the errors and omissions insurance is for.
Right. So that's kind of where I think you're sensing why people are asking about that, because it's one of these things which is yet another one of these examples where we hire a supposer, or we go to a supposed expert firm, and then they give us, it's one thing to say, hey, the project's taken longer and construction costs have gone up, but it's another thing to say, we gave you a design plan and a cost estimate for a treatment plant, but we missed a glaring piece of it that's required by the regulations that we're supposed to be expert in. So that's we'll let you dig into it, but that's what we want to understand is were our experts really experts?
Gotcha.
So
Can't we just put a porta potty there?
That's right.
We have one of those at the transfer station. I know that.
Well, there are trees around the facility, right? There you go.
It could be a nice one. We can put a wood shack around it and probably build it for like $2,000.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Outhouse, Leo, composting toilet.
We'll look at options. No, I understand the question, Sue. Let me get back to you on that. I think, again, I don't want to stir up between departments, but I think the shock was that it was being sort of pushed when obviously we have other facilities like this that don't have them. So I will get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Finn, from the DPW side? Okay, any other updates from anybody on liaison things? If not, then I'll let Tina, do you want to give us an update on from the select board?
Or can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, so we had a busy night last night. We talked about quite a bit. So I'll just jump in. Let's see. We heard from the governance committee. Their work moves forward now. They I think since they last updated you Tuesday of last week, they've since met with the town accountant, town treasurer, and town assessor. And again, their work continues with each individual of the 5-member committee now meeting with town managers and town administrators from other communities. So they're sort of starting an interview process. They did not present last night a plan to provide a recommendation for town meeting. So it's not on the table, it's not off the table. The placeholder still stands in the warrant. But there was no update from the governance committee last night in regards to their intentions or plans to get an article for town meeting. I think that's the gist of what they had to say in terms of what's current, what's relevant for right now. We heard from the chief. We approved 2 requests for the CARES Act. One was for recouping costs related to solid waste and recycling. And that amount was for approximately $34,000. We approved a second request for $4,200 for recouping costs at 260 Woodland Street. So in both of these things, we're talking trash. 260 Woodland, the containers stayed on the property longer because they couldn't be collected because nobody was doing business during the pandemic. So we paid fees related to that, $4,200. And then with solid waste and recycling, more people home, more people consuming in their homes and therefore disposing in their homes, and we are recouping those costs. That's the CARES Act. The chief talked about planning for town meeting, and one thing I want to point out is there's nothing changed in the governor's orders or recommendations in terms of a legislative body meeting. So things have changed for other groups, for other sectors, but in terms of town meeting being held, there's no different order from July 20th compared to today. So it's still possible for us to meet as we did in July. And we talked about how we would do that. The schools are off the table for a Sunday through Thursday kind of meeting because there's not enough time to clean the buildings. And so we were talking about a Friday, a Saturday, or a night before a no school day. And we were kind of playing around with the calendar a little bit. When you look at October 26th, that's the Monday. The first Friday there is October 30th, but that's 5 days, I think, before the national elections. So we kind of took that one off the table right away. So were we to postpone beyond October 26th, we'd be looking into November. Let's see. I think that's, and then we did talk about the DPW studies. Revamping them. I will let Ben speak. I'll let Ben speak, and I'll let Travis speak if you have specific questions, but they're being packaged as a water modernization study for, I think Ben talked about $55,000 as the request for town meeting. That's a combination of the water main replacement and the water source study. And then the sidewalk study is essentially as it was a year ago, and that was, we anticipate a $40,000 item on the warrant. And I mean, we had a lot to talk about, so I don't know if you have specific questions. I will leave it there and hear what you guys have to say with questions or comments.
Okay, well, Mr. Alford, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Hi, Tina. Thanks for the update. I was able to watch some of it. One question just on the timing of town meeting. There's a chance, obviously, you guys are going to be meeting next Tuesday, okay. and we're going to be in session. I don't know if you want to try to figure out a way that maybe we can meet to attend that or something. I know it's.
I will either try to move us or postpone us if necessary.
You're saying there's a conflict between your schedule and ours for Tuesday?
We always meet on Tuesday at 7 o'clock. That's our time.
Prime time.
Yeah, we're moving because of Yom Kippur on Monday.
No, I understand being Jewish, it's very important, but Wednesday's also a day of the week. But anyway, question on the timing of town meeting, I would like us to take into consideration when we push it off, assuming we're not considering pushing it off until January or something, which, that there are certain monies that are becoming available that could potentially be used to return money to taxpayers. and would need to be done before the who was it? The assessors set the tax rate.
Tax rate hearing. Okay.
I'm not.
Okay.
I forget. I know it's usually like late November.
Late November usually.
Late
Yeah.
November. And I don't know if it can be delayed a little bit or into this. I just don't know what the timing of that is. But it's something obviously I brought up publicly. It's something that I think would be a shame if we didn't take an opportunity to look at diligently. I certainly don't think it should be something that would cause a significant amount of debate, but maybe it would. I don't know, who knows. Because obviously you don't want to extend a town meeting in this pandemic if at all possible. But at the same time, I think that given everyone's circumstances, at least considering it would be important. I just wouldn't want to miss that opportunity just because of we didn't think about it at least.
Yeah.
At least if we knowingly postpone, we know what the ramifications are. So that's the decision of the board, and that's the decision. But
we've had no discussion at the board level for. I think what I hear you asking or suggesting is it would not be wise to have town meeting after the tax rate hearing. Is that the gist of it?
Or recognizing that you may need a special town meeting after that. If there's nothing that we need to do right now other than capital if we want to do it, but they couldn't wait longer because again we have budgeted conservatively, and we certainly the state isn't going to do anything 9C cuts or whatever isn't going to do anything to us that's going to more than likely harm us in our position and require us to need to cull money back from the departments. Or recommend anyway the town meeting that they cull money back from the departments or release more from stabilization or whatever. But at the same time, there are things that we should consider doing.
Yeah, and obviously from the tax rate perspective, they can the select board obviously can play with the hearing date, but only to a point because the bills have to go out the end of December if we want to for cash flow purposes, right? So
I just look. I've made a proposal, and I can talk to you offline about that proposal. And if that is not the will of the select board, that's your decision. I just don't want the date to be changed without at least being cognizant of what the impact to that will be. That's what I'm asking. It's just put that into the factor of 10,000 other things that you're putting into the factor when setting the date, and make sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two really important voices there that we've not heard from, and one is our town administrator on a recommendation. And Dan, I think when you make the comments you're making, you're also sort of referencing I'm going to say the wrong one. It's the overlay. It's from the assessor's office, the 484 that was transferred out. I think that's what's triggered your thinking. Is that correct?
That's what triggered, but again, I still don't know free cash. So, it could be if free cash comes in too low that we need that money to so it may not even be something that we feasibly can do because we don't have free cash yet.
That was the point I made last night to the select board is I'm not prepared to give them a recommendation right now until I know free cash. And I think that that timing is coming relatively quickly is the point that I made to the board last night.
Okay. And I just wanted to raise this so that Tina as our liaison knows at least my thinking. And I think there are other members on the board that feel similarly, but they can feel free to speak for themselves that'd be something that we strongly consider. And what?
And I said, or signal for themselves like Sue was doing.
That something we strongly consider, and if the board decides that that's not something that they're interested in, that's fine. But we're not. I mean, that's their wish. But I just don't want it to be missed because we just don't think about it when setting the date, and then it's too late.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Tina? Okay. Thank you, Tina.
You're welcome.
And,
I actually have a question.
Okay. Now you're pulling a Dan. That's what Dan usually does. So,
is that overlay, is that considered just a transfer of funds from one account to another?
So,
because if you have, for a special town meeting, if all you're doing is transferring funds, then you only need a quorum of 40.
But we're not having a special town meeting.
No, it is a special town meeting, right? October's the special.
It depends. It's also called the fall annual town meeting. It's
in the bylaws.
I'm just saying, according to the bylaws, if all you're doing is transferring money, you only need 40 people.
But this would be a return or a reduction of taxpayers.
We wouldn't want that anyway because we'd be there's an appropriation piece to some of this, right? So
Okay. That's right, because we still have capital.
Right.
Yeah, so the overlay can be appropriated. The mechanism is essentially it can be appropriated while it's in the stage that it's in right now, right? So they've released 484. It could be appropriated for multiple uses. It could be used in the Article 5, which is the placeholder I discussed last night. Not the placeholder, the sort of recurring article that says, would the town like to reduce the tax rate? It could be put into stabilization in Article 1, which I'll cover in a minute. Or it could go to sort of another fund. If we do nothing with overlay, the mechanism is essentially in place that if you just let it sit for the year, it flows to free cash at the end of the year. That's how overlay works. So that's the conversation. To Mr. Alfred's point, Article 5 is sort of what would be pitching. Article 1 is one of the articles that I mentioned previously. It could be put into stabilization for the 400,000 net that we'll talk about in a minute. Or there are multiple other opportunities, all of which are sort of in the air at the moment until we know other things such as free cash.
Yeah, just to reiterate, my proposition of this is pending free cash. All the other stuff that we need to know, making sure that we can do that. It's not the first thing on the list. If anyone watching.
Okay.
Right. So, okay. Any other questions? Try again. Okay. Let's move on then. Thank you, Tina. Again.
Thank you, Tina.
Okay, so COVID-19 update from the chief. We already heard a little bit from the town administrator, but go ahead,
Chief. Have you been there all week?
What was that, Dan?
Have you been there all week in that same spot, that same,
He hasn't moved.
Right.
Yeah, no, I, once I put the tie on, it's pretty constricting, and I try not to relocate. From a financial standpoint, not much beyond what Tina shared in terms of the board voted 2 additional expenses to go against the CARES Act. We're preparing the first quarter reporting, which needs to go into the Division of Administration and Finance this Friday. And things are moving forward.
Okay, so one thing I did, I figured I'd wait till I was you, because I know that you're the guardian of the A&F guidance, so to speak. Are we sure we're okay with the trash part of this, right? The Woodland Street thing, I talked to Travis about before. That makes perfect sense because that was a delay. Fees we incurred, as Tina pointed out, fees we incurred because of a delay because of COVID. But are we sure that A&F is going to be fine with us saying, people are home, so they're throwing out more stuff? That's okay. That's COVID related.
We are not the first community that has made this decision. And based on guidance from both the U.S. Treasury, based on the vote that was made by Congress, as well as the guidance that came from A&F, it seemed like a reasonable argument could be made that would be an appropriate expenditure of CARES funds.
Okay. I mean, the only reason I'm saying that was because the only kind of concern was that in a sense, it's a budgeted expense, right? You have a solid waste budget, you have, and you're running above that. Again, I'll leave, obviously it's your discretion and the select board's discretion, but I just want to make sure that we don't, if other towns are doing it and everybody seems to think that there's a correct legal basis for it, then I'm fine with it. But I just want to make sure that it's not going to come down and bite us in the end. Yeah, go ahead, Tina.
If we were the first of 351 cities and towns to make that decision, I would have been a little bit more conservative, but the fact that others had already clearly determined that that was appropriate, I was a lot more comfortable bringing it to the board.
Okay. Go ahead, Tina.
So, when you look at so Matt Zedek was the one who made the request, and I agree with everything Chief Cassidy's saying, pretty clear in my mind, at least, based on what I've read and what he presented. But when you look at what Matt was pulling together to make this request, this does exceed what's budgeted for FY21 for our solid waste and recycling program, our budget. So if we continue with the wheelabrator costs that we were seeing April, May, June, July, we haven't submitted a CARES Act at this point. What's been requested, the $34,000 is just through, correct me if I'm wrong, Chief Cassidy, but just through June. or is it up to June? But anyway, we'll see more coming in terms of a request. But if we were to continue without getting this overage, so to speak, paid for through the CARES Act, we would exceed our budget. This was unanticipated. So we had data from last year that we could say, look, we were trending down. Our budget reflected that for FY21, and now we're trending back up again. And that's what Matt Zedek captured. And I give him a lot of credit for seeing that this was what was happening.
Sorry, I didn't send the memo to the Finance Committee. I probably should have done that. So I'll send you his memo. I think it's well done. And I think based on what the chief said, which is that this is being done elsewhere, I would anticipate that we'll have another calculation coming up on this. And then when we do a Q1 update for the budget for the Finance Committee, we can talk where we are with our solid waste budget. But it's the tipping aspect of it, not what we had budgeted is sort of set in stone and we're just trying to get it back. That's, this is related to actual tipping.
No, I get it that usage is up. I'm not disputing that. It's more like, you could make up. Now, somebody could say, well, recycling costs are up because of the recycling. Somebody could say that, last week NPR said that no plastic is being actually recycled, and so maybe people, there are lots of reasons. I'm saying, I'm not arguing against making it a COVID expense. I'm more concerned about making sure it's a defensible COVID expense because I could play devil's advocate either way and make it sound like it's definitely COVID related, or make it sound like, hey, come on, people are throwing away more trash. How can you prove that's specifically because of COVID? That's all. So we don't need to spend a ton of time on it, but I just wanted to
right.
make sure.
To Travis's point, I think once you see Matt's memo, as was noted, it's very detailed. So I feel very comfortable that should A&F push back on us, we've got a good paper trail to explain that this wasn't just arbitrary and capricious. And I can assure you, I don't bring everything to the board. There are requests that come to me that I do actually say no to. So I do hold the line.
Good. Okay, so we have several people. Go ahead. I'll just go across my screen. So Ms. Zimmer, you're first.
Since the CARES money expires December 31st, if there is no CARES money extended, depending on election results and things, should we be looking at raising the sticker fee from $1 because it's been $1
$2
for as long as I remember? Is it $2?
Yes.
$2.
Your memory, I guess, is not.
It's just been that long since she bought a sticker. I
have a dumpster at the office.
That would be a decision that I would defer to my bosses. I would not want to weigh in on that topic.
And I'm not going on record right now talking about raising trash stickers.
No, is it the stickers or is it the recycling? Is it trash or is it the recycling? I guess.
Yeah, Michelle, it's both, and it's actually not driven by the trash stickers at all in terms of a factor in the decision to make this request. It's based on the tipping fees, so what we're charged, if that's the right word to say, by Wheelaprater, the company that takes our trash and recycling and processes it. So it's an invoice from Wheelaprater, and that's where we're seeing the cost increase.
Well, I guess if I can interject,
throwing away more. I guess I don't understand.
I think the analogy is why we're being told to have our septic systems pumped, right? Instead of going into the office, instead of going into school, instead of going out for dinner, we're doing all our business at home, and we're hearing, you really should get your septic system, your leaching field, and so on, your tank pumped. And let me just back up a minute and talk to Travis through the call here. Travis, I don't know, Matt Zedek is well versed in the world of solid waste and recycling. He could probably pull forward some information. I don't recall seeing it in his memo, but I'm quite certain he could pull forward some information that's kind of answering these questions about what they're seeing in the industry statewide in response to this pandemic. What we're experiencing here in Holliston, every community is experiencing. People, like to your question, Michelle, people are just staying, they're home more.
I understand, and I've been to Wheelabrator, I've been to Covanta, I've seen tipping floors. I've
sorry.
I've seen more trash than probably anyone here has seen in my day. I understand all of this. I just don't understand if we have our 30-gallon trash can, if we're filling that up and it's not excess on the side,
no, not everyone fills it.
More per ton?
Right. Well, that's
not everyone fills it up every week. You don't budget for everyone to be filling it up every week, but now they are, or they're filling it up more. So if we expected half of it to be full by average across the board, now it's 3/4 full across the board, and so you're just
okay. So they're not charging more.
No, I just sent the memo.
Yeah, and that was basically going to be what I was going to inject before, right? We have 35-gallon trash cans and whatever 65-gallon recycling bins, right? So the question then becomes, and this is the discussion we can have next budget cycle, right? What is the assumption for that fill rate? In other words, then it would at least give us an understanding of what our potential exposure was. In other words, if we were budgeting, for half full trash cans and now we're getting full ones, and we had X dollars, in the budget for assuming half full, now we got to make sure we know that the potential overage is 2X, right? So if everybody fills it.
I'm just remembering when we got those parts, everyone was looking and saying, oh my God.
I know. Well, Michelle, Jeff Ritter was right. He said, just wait. Everybody will adjust and this will all get better. And I agree.
So that makes one thing.
What's that?
So that makes one thing.
Okay, let's not go there.
He was right. And I think we all recall the conversations of July 2019, where it was the world was ending and diapers were going to be strewn across the street kind of conversations. And I think the reality has turned out to be something quite different. And that's the point that Matt was making in his memo, I think, and we talked about last night, is that people are now filling those bins up to a greater extent than they were before.
Okay. I won't. Thank you.
Can I just, I apologize for one thing. I went to send you a Matt Zedek memo from last night, and I sent you one that was not on this topic. So I resent you the one on this topic. So now you have a whole bunch of Matt Zedek in your inbox.
Yeah, but Travis, I haven't seen the one that you didn't send us. So now you have to send it to me now.
That's right.
I CC'd you and the chief on both.
Okay, good.
Okay, so Mr. Alfred, you had comments?
Yeah, can I just be the pain in the ass that I am and ask a stupid question, but I'm curious about it anyway. Why is Matt Zedek doing this? I mean, he's a sustainability coordinator. I mean, this was not what he certainly hired to do. I mean, isn't this whose responsibility, I guess, is this?
I think if I may, I think I might have the answer to that question. And this is just as I understand it. This is not from Matt's mouth or anybody else. This is as I would interpret and understand it myself. His committee, the folks that he meets with, the Sustainable Waste and Recycling Committee. They're the folks who put forward this trash program in the first place. They're the ones who created it and brought it to the select board at the time. They're the ones who care very much, probably the most of anybody, about this program being a success. If I had to guess, those conversations were happening with the Sustainable Waste and Recycling Committee, and that's how Matt became looped in. But I'll let Travis speak to, if he wants to, more about how Matt is involved in all areas of many areas, I should say, of town hall activity. But that's the assumption I would make, is that it was brought to him by the Sustainable Waste and Recycling Committee, who were saying, hey, look, I think that you're going to see your costs go up. But that's the calculation.
I would say to Dan's question, if Matt had not sort of put this forward, who would it have been? It would have been me, and I can't honestly tell you that I would have thought of this. So I would say that, from that regard of the suggestions, to the chief's point, we've had quite a few that have not passed muster. But of the ones that did, especially as you'll see from what I forwarded to you, Matt clearly put a lot of thought into this that, I quite frankly, in my first 2 or 3 months on the job, would not have put together when it comes to solid waste. And the fact that if you just looked at year over year tippage, I would not have noticed. But if you look at the fact that we had made changes, our trend for the tippage was down, but is sort of not continued that way because everybody is home throwing things away. If it were not for Matt, this idea probably would not have come forward. But if in the long run, let's say the town administrator's office had somebody who'd been here for more than 3 months, I guess the next person to bring it up would have been me.
It's only 2 months, so don't kill yourself. 3 months, and I would be all over you for it. But I mean, but when we're getting bills in, do we get bills from them monthly? How do we? So when those weren't like running above budget. I mean, I'm just kind of like, shouldn't there?
Oh no, I mean, I'm looking at that budget, and I'll bring that to the finance committee for a Q1 update to show where we're running. Again, if you just look at it in terms of expenditures year over year. But it wouldn't necessarily have popped out at me if you look at it in terms of what we expected with recent changes in the town's setup.
You reduced the solid waste budget.
Right, but aren't we looking at the budget as we spend each month, the percentage of the year that we're spending in a department sort of like solid waste, which, or sort of the trash, which I'm sure there's a little bit of variability from different months because summer maybe people are more away and so there's not as much. But it wouldn't the bills have sort of shown this as well?
And that's what Matt caught. It's just you have to remember that July of 2019 was zero. There was nothing before because the trash program didn't exist before then. So what Matt is captured.
We were paying for trash.
No, I understand that, but what I mean to say is with the new. I'm sorry, there's talking in the background. With the new program, we don't have any data that we can refer to before July of 2019. So what he captured was 7 months of FY20 was trending down. Then the pandemic hit, and we started to trend back up. But
I get that. But anyway, we can talk about it offline. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
It'll help when you see the memo, I think.
Okay. Mr. Murphy?
Are we talking trash or recycling or both?
Yes.
Both.
The trash, I would be just concerned, and I don't know the specifics around the CARES Act, but usually if there's revenue associated with it, you have to offset. So there's a whole convoluted thing with federal grants and revenue. So just keep that in mind that we actually we have trash stickers. So the overage might be a problem if we can just segregate the recycling. We might be in a better shape and from an argument standpoint, just because I just have to deal with that just now as something just came up in my place. So.
Okay. So have we had enough trash talking for tonight?
I hope so.
Okay.
I just, if I could, with the indulgence of the chair, as a follow-up to Mr. Alfred's question as to why Matt Zedek, Matt is an example of a lot of the people who the town has attracted into their service in the last couple of years. People question why Chris Mayo is involved in the green communities. People question why the fire chief is involved in the green communities. It's because we've got people who care passionately about making sure that we save the town every dollar that we can, and we are as efficient as possible. And so the fact that Matt did the research and brought it to us, it was a great use of resource.
My concern was not that it was not to impugn Matt and his work. It was more, we just sort of hired him for something completely different. So, if not for him, who? But
he's leaving no stone unturned, and he wants to do the best that he can for town.
Well, he just cost us $35,000, so we'll take him out of his pay.
Okay, let's not go down that road. Okay. Anything else update-wise, Chief? In terms of the one thing I was going to ask you about is, are we going to be red soon? Only because I'm thinking about the schools and things like that.
So with our 14% increase that we had in the last week, we should go to yellow tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. But all 11 active cases have no connection to the school. There are 9 of those active cases are traced to a congregate care facility, and 2 of them are co-located in a single-family home where the youngest child is in their early 30s. So this should not have any impact on school style of curriculum.
I just heard about increased case count, and obviously from our perspective, right, schools having to change plans at some point will have definite financial impact. So we want to make sure that.
No, we celebrated when we went back to gray last week, but I did quickly put on their radar that although we were likely going to yellow this Wednesday, that there was no linkage to the school population.
Okay, good. Because obviously that's what everybody's going to be looking for in the next few weeks. So, okay, anything else, Chief?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, next is FY21 budget. And I know, Travis, you had some updates to give us, so go ahead.
All right, so the two updates, it looks like we have James Keast. The first update is going to be on the police union contract impact for FY21. This was signed last night, and I'll go high level and I can answer questions if we need to, but the second one is going to be 260 Woodland. Not looking for a vote tonight, but to sort of finalize a conversation that had been happening before I got here, and was sort of the last component was last night with CARES Act. So James is here to talk about 260. I will go in the police union. Just want to cover a couple highlights. So what ended up happening related to everything going on at the moment, COVID, discussing a 3-year contract just was not very prudent for either side. So we did do a 1-year contract that's going to take us through the end of this fiscal year, puts us back at the table probably in January, talking about a 3-year contract. Again, January, we're not going to be sunshine and rainbows. We're not probably going to have all the answers that we're looking for, but ideally we're beginning to sort of see the end of the tunnel and be able to think 3 years out. So that's the idea. So this contract is really just to move us to that point, get us to more answers. So a 1-year contract takes us through the end of this fiscal year. The way that we've done this, there's no retro. So the first day essentially was last night. As the board voted, it was ratified by the Police Association last Friday. The goals of the town were to sort of approach a couple. It was really housekeeping, right? So a zero COLA, not touching the educational incentive, nothing that's going to drastically impact the budget. We did touch on a few things that the union wanted to discuss. We touched on a few things that we wanted on the town side. Just I would call them housekeeping, but there's a couple things that I would cover just because I know that they're items on your radar. We tried to give the chief so a little bit more control when it comes to OT. So we worked in some ability for him to control the schedule a little bit more, require sort of information ahead of time to allow him to schedule and sort of control OT. OT is what it is, but at the same point, what we think we've sort of worked in will give him the ability to manage it as best we can. Another component, what we were looking for, as I mentioned earlier on the health insurance, the only contract that we have that sort of specified anything when it came to healthcare was that the police contract specified the split, and it specified specific types of plans that we would offer. So we've removed that. Now every union has the same language, which is essentially that we will offer health insurance compliant with laws, right? So that was something that, again, is sort of, what we wanted to, we're glad that the union was amenable to that. We think that that's going to really help us when we're back at the table in January. Some of these things are not needing to be discussed. One other thing I would point out that I know the Finance Committee has been interested in is comp time, specifically not running up liabilities that carry into the future. So one of the things that we worked in there was, when somebody goes through a significant promotion, comp time needs to be paid out at the rate that they were before the promotion, right? So what we're concerned about is somebody accruing comp time at a lower rate, eventually carrying that into a time where they're getting paid substantially more and then cashing out at that time. So at this point, with a significant promotion, that would trigger a payout of comp time. Additionally, the chief now has the ability, if comp time is getting aggressive or getting to be a high number, he has the ability to initiate a payout so that it doesn't carry too long. Additionally, as of 6/30, one component of comp time, which is called money owed, will be paid out so that it does not carry over the fiscal year. So that is to say all the things that we were sort of looking for. At the same point, obviously, the union was looking for some things. The total of the mechanics of things that we moved around in terms of some percentages for shift diff and those types of things equates to about $27,000, $27,500 for this fiscal year. And so what we looked at was where we are with the budget, where we're projecting based on some personnel changes that we know of. We've had some people leave for other positions in other towns. So we think that $27,500 will be covered within the budget without need for town meeting or a finance reserve transfer. based on our current projections. Obviously, we'll be coming back to you each quarter to sort of make sure that we're still on track with that. But the way that this has been designed is to keep us within the budget that's been set for personnel costs in the police department for this year. And then just to that same idea, the mechanism that I was concerned about, which is a good thing for the town in the long run, which is paying out a certain component of comp time as of 6/30, so it doesn't carry, to be able to pay that cost. What we said was, do we have that money? And the answer is yes. We encumbered a certain amount for that from the previous fiscal year. And so we think everything sort of is all inclusive here.
So the bottom line is that there's a 1-year contract, and we think it's going to be covered within the police budget. That's the bottom line. Go ahead, Mr. Alfred. You had a comment.
Yeah. So this sounds great. I think that a 1-year contract makes a lot of sense. I've been a proponent of that since this thing sort of started. And as you said, it protects us and protects them. We sort of get the cost containment within this year when revenue is uncertain, and they aren't sort of forced into a position where anyone has to sign a long-term contract. The one thing I would say is, and this is something that we sort of go back and forth with on the schools, is sort of how the finance committee is updated throughout these things. It is my great preference that we do not find out about the completion of a contract and its costs after it's been signed and ratified and voted on. Just, in this case, it would have been more like, hey, this is where we think we're going to come out, and we're going to be able to cover it all within the budget, and then you're basically done. But in other cases, at times it could be that if they wanted a 3-year deal, it may have been that things were more expensive this year and couldn't have been covered in the budget, and sort of at least letting us know ahead of time as we start thinking about things in an executive session. If it's certainly beforehand, and the schools do that with us, as we can get them in. Sometimes things move a little quicker than necessary, but just also sort of get our feedback on where we think things are going and what our thoughts are.
Yeah, I think certainly if this had been trending in a way that we felt like it was going to have significant 21 impact, whether it be town meeting or a transfer, we certainly probably would have gone a different direction. Again, as Ken eloquently summarized at the end there, which I probably should have started with, we contained it, we believe, based on our projections within the fiscal year. And it's really going to be, sort of coming back to you on a quarterly basis, updating you where we are in the budget to make sure that that's still on track. But at the point where, it sort of is a lot of housekeeping items that quite frankly, I know because most finance committees would be on board with not allowing, comp time accruals to sort of roll and those types of things, that I didn't think anything here was sort of in need of executive session along the way. I think this is pretty straightforward. We're housekeeping up to the point where we're going to be back at the table in January, and hopefully now have most of these types of things out of the way and just be talking about where we want those salaries to be over the next 3 years.
No, understood. And the way this worked out, it's less, but from procedural point of view, it's still sort of, something I'll let my statement stand, that we'd like to, just be kept sort of in the loop on where things are looking and going, before they're, again, just like, ideally before, costs are incurred, even emergency costs, would be better we'd like to know that up front. Obviously, if over the weekend the fire engine falls out and needs to be sent for repairs, that's, it's unfeasible. But in most circumstances, letting us know before money is spent or is better than afterwards, so that we can at least have that opportunity.
Are you talking about this one or 260 Woodland? Because that's next.
What's that?
I say, you're talking about this item or 260 Woodland? Because that's next.
I was going to say that I think you made your point, Dan, on the.
Yeah, that's why I stopped. And then Chief came in.
Okay, so go ahead. Go on the next one, Travis.
Did the Chief have something?
Oh, okay. Did the Chief have something?
It was only going to be snarky. It's fine.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, again, I mean, if there are other questions that come up, obviously there's many variables included. I tried to hit a high level. I probably could have done it even more high level, but I think Ken's summary is the summary. We're happy to be moving on. We'll be back at the table. January is right around the corner. So more to come. The other budget item, I think, is one that you're familiar with, and is now, James and I have been going back and forth on, and we need to clean up and move on from. So 260 Woodland, James, take it away.
All right, lucky me. So I have notes, meeting minutes from the meeting from May 5th of the Finance Committee. And the reason why I did some research, because I couldn't honestly remember if we did a lump sum transfer for the funds to cover the cost of the cleanup at 260 Woodland, or what was the process to get these bills paid. And what I found was that the select board actually voted to use reserve funds to cover the expenses for the cleanup rather than waiting for town meeting. And then the request was that the finance committee would approve the bills as they come in and cannot approve a lump sum up front. And that the finance committee would need a formal line item request as well as an update from the town accountant from the reserve fund balance. So at this point, we've received the bills, and some bills have been paid. And those bills were being paid, but going against the initial $25,000 that was approved in town meeting to cover the demolition of the building, as well as removal of the waste that was on site, basically the waste from the demolition of the buildings. As we know, the contractor that took down those buildings did it in such a way that it distributed the waste across the entire site. DEP came in, shut it down, and we had to go through a remediation effort to get that all cleaned up. So basically, we're at the point now where we need to pay the bills. All the bills have come in. We've closed out the initial $25,000 from the project that was allocated in town meeting. We now need to pay the current bills, which total about $57,000. I've broken them down into three buckets and had filled out the transfer request forms, which I have then sent to Sharon to look at, apply the appropriate object numbers. And once those are finalized, we can send them to the select board as well as the FinCom for approval. So that's the current state. I do have a notice to proceed from the select board, which put it at, put a cap, if you will, at $50,000. Unfortunately, we went over by $7,000, and there's two factors that are driving that. One is there was a component of the cleanup process that the DEP requires that's monitoring the air as they're cleaning up this site so that there's no airborne asbestos. My understanding was that that cost of that monitoring, which is about $5,400, would be borne by the contractor. When I reached out to the contractor after the work was done, they sent me a note saying that there was a contract that was initiated by the town back in February. It says we would cover those costs. That was unanticipated. It was a contract signed before my time, signed before Travis's time, but that didn't show up, and so they were now responsible for those fees. And the other piece is the rental of the dumpsters. And talking with Casella initially, they were going to try to work with us. I couldn't get anything in writing from them about what that would translate to in terms of discounts. But we're stuck with basically 4 months of rental, which totaled about $68,000 or $7,800. Of that, we were able to allocate $4,412 to CARES. So that balance then, which is a few $1,000s, applied to or added to that contract piece that we're now responsible for, puts us at the $7,000. So that's the general update. Those forms, those transfer request forms will be coming. Hopefully, you'll have them by your meeting next week.
Yeah, I should have. Yeah, they're ready. Sharon actually texted me while we were meeting tonight and said that she stuck them in the box, so we'll have them for next week. But
okay,
so the bottom line is, first of all, a couple of things. Just as a FYI for future stuff, the reserve fund transfers have to be approved by the finance committee, not the select board.
Okay.
So I'm not saying you can't get, obviously the select board as the oversight authority has to approve them, approve the requests. But I'm saying that just a select board approval on its own does not mean anything from the point of view of the transfer of the funds, right? It has to go through both of our boards.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
Yeah, I'm just making clear on that because I don't want anybody to think that, they approve it and then, it means you can spend the money, right? That has to go through both boards before that happens. Yes, go ahead, Travis.
Can I just, so my understanding, we were trying to figure this out and follow through minutes, which is always fun. But so this committee was aware of it and said, essentially, give us the total amount to do the transfer. And then that sort of somewhere got dropped in the ether.
No. I know. I get it. This has nothing to do with him doing anything wrong. I'm just pointing out for the record.
I'm just trying to confirm that you're comfortable that you were aware of it, but that there was this next step never happened by somebody on our end. Yeah, I got it.
We were told about this.
That's fine. The only reason I was pointing that out was because when he was speaking about it, he said, we went to the select board and they approved the reserve fund transfer. And so we went and spent the money. And I'm like, I just want to point out for the record that yes, you talked to us and I'm not disputing anything about that part of it. I'll get to that in a second. But just procedurally, right? An approval from the select board only does not give you authorization to spend reserve fund monies. That's all I'm saying. Yeah.
No, and I guess the component here that I just want to make sure I'm understanding, right, is that what James is saying is he didn't get a lump sum transferred amount from the finance committee because he didn't have all the bills. So there has to be a sort of authorization for him to spend, then have the transfer, right? And I think that somewhere in the middle is where we got lost.
And that's why I said that's a separate issue, right? So I was just clarifying that statement to just make sure you understood, James, that you needed both, okay?
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I also understand the history here, which was you came to us and we said, we need to see the bills. We don't just generally give you a pot of money and say, spend it, right? We need to see what it's being spent for. So I'm not saying you did anything wrong in any way. You did what we wanted you to do. Okay. The next question I was going to have was, so now it sounds like we have bills, right? We have bills, some of which are being paid by COVID, some of which we had the $25,000 for. Do we know, first of all, is the job done?
Yes, the job is done. I was there today, in fact, doing my final walkthrough, and everything is done. We're officially should have no more expenses on that side.
So now that you're done, okay, you can tell us exactly how much it cost, right? Or are we still waiting for, right? So that's kind of what we told you to do was, okay, now give us the bills. Now, presumably it's in the paperwork, which I don't have, so that's okay. I'll assume it's in the paperwork. But just for the committee's knowledge, and because I don't have paperwork in front of me, what was the total? How much did it cost to do the whole thing?
The total cost, including the CARES, less the CARES piece.
Well, include the CARES. I mean, I'm not talking about funding sources. I'm just saying, what did the total cleanup cost?
The total cleanup costs, well, let me get my calculator here. Well, actually not.
You're saying with the 25,000 warrant article, right?
Well, as I said, forget about the funding sources. I'm saying, what was the total amount of money from any source?
So he's adding them all up.
I'm adding them all up. So the total, including for the whole project, is $82,012.
Okay.
So how much? And then that's net 25,000 and 4,400. So right. You're looking at $50,000 total.
57.
57.
That's what we need.
57 is what's left.
That's what we need from the reserve fund.
Yes.
Well, it's a good thing we put extra money in the reserve fund, because if we had our normal level of reserve fund, this would be sapping, 20% of it. Yeah. Quarter.
No, but that's the reason I wanted to know the total was just for that reason, because it's not on either James or Travis because they weren't here. But this is just for the note I want to make on this is an example of going to the town and saying the job's going to cost X, and then it comes out 3X, right? The reason that was 25,000 at town meeting was because that was what we were told. That's what the town was told, right? Oh, it's a simple little project. We're going to clean it up. It's this old dilapidated thing, 25 grand, right? And here it comes in at 82. And I'm not going to pontificate on it. There's no point in doing that. other than to say, this is why it's important to get your ducks in a row, right? Because people in town may look at this at some point and say, if they're following, not that they're following along, but they would look at it and say, okay, so we authorized the $25,000 cleanup, and then it ended up being more than 3 times as much as we were told it was going to be, right? And that's from my personal perspective. The committee can chime in as they see fit. That's the kind of stuff we really want to avoid. And again, I'm not putting this on either of the two of you. You weren't here for this, right? But it's just one of these things where that just feeds the public perception that when somebody comes in and says we need money for something, that somebody's going to look at it and say, yeah, you're going to ask for this, and then you're going to come in. We've heard about 2 things already, right? One is the treatment plant, and now this, where the town was told this is the amount of money it's going to be, and now it's turning out to be a substantial delta. And that's we want to try to, obviously, it can't head that off in every case, but we want to try to do our best to minimize those kinds of gross overages like that.
I feel confident that a lot of this is, that we're still reaping the impacts from our prior, the prior regime, and
right. And that's why I'm making it perfectly clear. This has nothing to do with Travis or James. I'm just telling them that this is what we want to avoid, right? So okay, so we have the paperwork. Sharon says the paperwork's there. So committee, from our standpoint, we'll take it up at our next meeting. I'll go get the paperwork from town hall. So anything else on Woodland? So now it's done, clean, no toxic waste or anything? And
no, we're good. There's it's being temporarily used for the work going on at Casey's, but okay. I think they're storing some sand and things there. But other than that, it's looking good.
Okay. Okay. Anything else, Travis, for budget stuff?
No, I know. I think Sue had got some answers from James directly on the police station. I don't know if the finance committee has anything on that. You guys asked for that update. Put together the James and chief email on that. Obviously, again, we'll come back, look at the police budget in our Q1 update. But if there's any questions there, otherwise I got nothing else on 21.
Okay. Okay. The only thing I would like to say on the budget side is just give everybody an update. The state, obviously, I pinged Pooja, still haven't heard back from her, but I did get some anecdotal information that the state is still waiting for federal aid, essentially. It's going to be very interesting because now with the politics going on at the federal level, and it's looking far less likely that we're going to see any type of second package before the election. I've already started hearing some rumbling that the reality may soon be setting in. And what I mean by that is, if, we all know, right? We've talked about this for months. The state is waiting for the feds to do something in hopes that they'll do something to give municipal aid in the next relief package. Obviously, they can't kick the can too far down the road because we'll be through FY21 at the rate things are going, right? So I just wanted to update everybody that I'm starting to hear rumbling that, they're still hoping for that federal aid, but I think that it's starting to, at the edges, starting to sink in that, hey, if this aid's not coming for a while, we might have to start taking some actions that are necessary to close a hole we might have. So no, and I'm not trying to say I know anything about what those actions might be or whether they're real. I know that the select board is trying to get another update from Karen and Carolyn.
They'll be there Tuesday.
Do we have confirmed for Tuesday?
Both of them, yep. Okay,
because I had heard Mr. Cronin told me that they hadn't confirmed yet. So so obviously, we can attend that meeting to get any further information. So I'll just defer that to them. But I'm just saying that it's pretty clear at this point that from a budget standpoint, we're not going to see any substantial movement until either the feds move or it gets to probably December when they realize they have to do something, right? So, but we'll get an update from them directly next week. Anything else? Anybody wanted to feedback on FY21? Okay, then let's move on to our last topic, which is. I
have a question. So could we have town meeting if we don't have numbers from the state?
We can, right? There's nothing, because we did our work in July, right? We talked about this back then, right? Our specific intent of the budget we passed was we're covered, hopefully, if the state comes through with cuts because we planned on those cuts, right? We left ourselves with upside, not downside risk, mostly, right? So from our perspective, we should be okay, right? If in the worst case the state comes back and says, okay, the feds aren't doing anything, now we have to lop local aid 15-20%. We built that in, so we're okay. So from a town meeting perspective, it's not going to blow the budget unless they have to really go far and they go beyond 20% in local aid. So
all we really need is certified free cash.
Exactly. All the town meeting for us from the financial side, the primary things are spending money on capital. If we get the free cash certification, doing allocation of that, dealing with the 484, right? Those are kind of the budget highlights. But in the worst case, right? In the worst case, we'll survive if wave 2 of the pandemic or the end of wave 1 or 1B or whatever Chief Cassidy wants to call it, right, ends up happening, and we say, okay, we can't really reasonably have a town meeting. We put in place a fiscal framework, and when I say we, I mean the town, right? Not us. We recommended it, they approved it. That will get us through the entirety of the fiscal year if we have to.
Right, but I mean, if we don't have numbers from the state, could we still have town meeting?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
I think I would say, where the budget is right now, right, based on what they've said, which is they're going to come in flat on Chapter 70 and UGA. A good point, and I don't want to, Ken and I had a previous conversation. I think a good point is to look at previous history where sometimes the state will wait until after the November election so it's less of a political hit and then do something. If they were to go back on what they've said they're going to do for Chapter 70 and UGA, I don't think it could be reasonably expected it would be worse than what was assumed in the budget that was set. So we have a budget set to get us through June that assumes a 20% reduction in state aid. I don't think we honestly need anything from the state so much as long as they get back to us on our free cash number. The town of Holliston can do its business while they wait.
What is UGA?
Unrestricted general government aid.
Oh, thank you.
So the cherry sheet
pair of boots. A great pair of boots.
Yeah, they're cute UGG boots. No, the cherry sheet's broken into two major components. The Chapter 70 is tied to schools, and UGA is sort of free.
Okay.
Everything else, yeah. Remember, they used to break it down by lottery and everything else, and they just finally lumped that all into unrestricted general government aid. So
you're dating yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Yep.
In more ways than one. Then more ways than one. Okay, so that's kind of a good segue. We started topic 6, which is special town meeting. So Travis, you wanted to give us more an item there.
Okay, so you have a hard stop at 8:30. I guess one thing we could do. Well, we could do. So some of these are capital, right? And I know we've had some conversations on a few of these. Vin and Michelle have information they could probably share with the group. Whether I can meet with you next week or not on the DPW articles, I think they've certainly collected the information. I think to update you without my presence, certainly. So let me just share my screen very quickly to give the same information I gave to the board last night. I am a host disabled participant. Chris, can I have authority, please? Oh, thank you. So let me do this. You can all see this, I assume. So this is just what I went over last night. This is not the final list. This is what I have right now. So I have a couple placeholders for things that I've sort of heard about. Right. I have nothing from the governance committee, but I have, the idea that it's on my list just in case it's coming. I know of a potential citizens petition, those types of things I have on my radar. These are the ones that I sort of believe are set in stone. So the first 6 are the standard bearers, putting money into the stabilization fund. Again, that could come from free cash. That could come from the overlay. That could come, that is a pretty standard amount. And we know we need to make up the 400,000 at least. Capital expenditure, again, that's the money going in. Sales surplus equipment is pretty standard, just to authorize that. The capital budget I can go into, but I think you've had that information quite a bit. I can take questions by email too, obviously, if people need more. The fund transfer to affect the tax rate, that's what Dan was speaking about earlier. Community Preservation Fund, I would just mention that they have listened to some pitches, but they are having, their process includes a hearing on those. And I want to say it's the 23rd. I want to say it's tomorrow night. Let me just confirm that. So they have heard at least 3 from James Keast on projects that the town would like to pursue. One is the library facade. One is work that can be done on windows to sort of preserve town hall and help us all be less cold. Energy conservation, but also stick to the historical nature. And then the grand hall floors upstairs. So there's a couple things on CPC's radar for the town side. The next one, roadway drainage and sidewalks. That's one I put together information for the group, but I can certainly get into it. The sidewalk prioritization plan and the water system modernization plan. Ben got into that quite a bit last night with the select board. Again, Michelle and Vin have been sort of giving him a lot of questions that they'd like to see feedback on. And so we can discuss it as much as possible, or I can just leave that to the liaisons. The water main replacement, this is, the miles that we're trying to do per year. That's a big chunk, 2.8 million. The balance is 2.9. That's the fee, the infrastructure fee designed to sort of get us through those miles. Unfortunately, what we're seeing in the market is an increase. So whereas we used to have 1 million per mile, this reflects essentially 1.4 million per mile to get 2 miles done in this Winter Street area. The water treatment plant, I gave all of that information to you on Friday. I think the questions that I have here today from Sue earlier on the bathroom specifically, and then, breaking down the 600,000 in the construction costs, I think was something that Vin wanted. I don't have that information for you right now, Vin, I apologize, but I will get that to you. I would say, probably giving more information by writing on this one. This is obviously substantial. The only thing I would say on this, and if Ken, you want to jump in, but the way that Sean wrote the memo is to say the 8.375 was a borrowing authorization. The balance of the water retained earnings is 1.44. The $1 million could come out of water retained earnings. That is one potential component, right? I also have the language from bond counsel. We could increase the borrowing authorization. Then if the bid comes in lower, we've essentially done nothing other than increase the authorization. If we were to approve something from water retained earnings or capital expenditure fund, which is something that Ken has mentioned to me as well, is just a possibility, that would tie up those funds until the project is done, whereas a borrowing authorization wouldn't. So it's just something to think about. We really have 3 options at least to tackle that $1 million, but answering the questions on why we need the $1 million, I think, is the first step. So I'll come back to you.
And one other thing on that, just Travis, is sure. Keep in mind that 600 grand was already paid towards that 8.3 million. All right, that 8.3 million originally included the design plan, and that design plan we paid cash for that.
Okay.
So theoretically, they should have 600,000 already excess capacity in that borrowing authority. Okay.
I'll take a look at that. Article 12, stormwater management. This is essentially our keeping up with the MS4 permit. So classic unfunded mandate from the federal government. I mean, this is part and parcel. My main concern here is not sort of where we are right now. These are engineering costs that we absolutely need to incur to stay on top of it. My concern more, and what I'll probably be discussing with the finance committee for years to come, is sort of what this is going to lead to in terms of large scale projects. Hopefully we don't have a lot of those lists, but right now we're just keeping up with the MS4 permit by doing this. The number that I have on the screen that I sent to you, or on the sheet that I sent to you last Friday, is in the 93,000 range. That's the worst it would be. That's based on a quote with a menu. If we were able to remove some of the things that we need to comply with DEP in the next 18 months, that 93 can come down. The total quote is 93, but it's a menu. So still taking a look at that.
Travis, just how often do you have to do the stormwater management? Is that like an annual thing, or is the 93 going to be just every 3 years or so like that?
It's probably at the best case scenario is probably every other year. Okay. I believe actually 60,000 was approved at the fall town meeting last year.
Yep.
And this is a different scope in the engineering, but it's all to the same end goal, which is staying in compliance with the MS4 permit. I'll talk MS4 all day, but that's not what we want to spend our time on tonight. But we can certainly get back more into that and start to talk long term on MS4. It's going to be very important. 9 Green Street, I think, I got some feedback from the capital subcommittee on sort of where the idea originally was to sort of say, let's make this presentable so it's not just a liability to the middle of town and then potentially flip it. I talked to Mary Bosquet about that today, and I'll follow up on that. This is not committing to a parking lot idea, which is one that I've heard since I came to town, but this is saying we need to do something about the building. I got kids. We're rousing punks off the roof. We got to do something with the building. We got to come up with a long-term plan to contain the contaminants underneath it. We got to do all that. The next step, 9 Green Street Committee came up with a plan that they put forward, or a suggestion they put forward. But there were other ones too that Ken had mentioned to me. So just taking a look at that, this is specifically to sort of design, to make sure that we have a plan to demo that building, a plan for the stormwater of that building, especially because of the contaminants, and then sort of what that site could be in the end and the cost of that if the town wanted to pursue anything. James and I are expecting an actual quote on that, but we believe it will be under the 40,000 that I have on the list. And then the public safety TAC, they have a meeting on Thursday, and I expect a final sort of, this is what we're looking for, and this is the dollar amount on it. The suggestions, I think I mentioned to you last week, signage is a big need for them to be able to meet sort of the things that are coming in front of them, and they can't really tap the $1,000 in the DPW budget. That's really just to maintain signs that are broken and worn. They're looking to sort of capitalize a number of things to be able to answer requests, but then they also want some things that are going to help them. Truck traffic is a huge issue, those types of things, to be able to enforce some things. That they need some equipment that they don't currently have. So they're going to be discussing that Thursday, and then I should be able to get you a final. This is specifically within the 40,000, or if the number changes, what that is. So these are the 14 I have right now. I know are sort of existing. Let me just stop sharing for a second so I can go back. I mentioned last night too. So one other thing I want to mention, and Ken, I know you got to get out, so this can be a longer term conversation. The revolving fund for solar revenue is not going to be on this town meeting. I think I'll be coming back to you with a few options that we should pursue for that. The home rule petition revolving fund mashup thing is not something that I feel is the right way to go. There are a couple options I discussed with Department of Local Services, Tax Council yesterday. And our council, and so I think we'll be talking about that. That's probably on the May timeline, so that's sort of fallen off of this one. I don't think that puts us behind the 8 ball. I think May is the right time to talk about that. If anything, again, the warrant is open through October 1st, so other things can be coming in. These are the things that I'm tracking right now. Oh, and sorry, it was floated because of the Lowland Industrial Park Forum and also issues that we have in the Hoppingbrook Industrial Park area. There's been quite a bit of social media and feedback that we're getting directly, not just social media, but that's where it sort of blows up. That we don't necessarily do our own traffic engineering. When we get traffic engineering, it's generally done by a developer coming in. We force them to do it, then we force them to pay for us to peer review it. So one of the ideas that was floated was, sort of giving our own staff the ability to have access to traffic engineering, which requires money. I don't have that article currently in front of me, but it's something that's been brought up. So it's on my sort of watch list. If I get that, I will share it with you ASAP.
What's the benefit of our paying for it?
So, for example, one of the conversations that came up in the Lowland industrial area is to pursue a heavy commercial vehicle exclusion on a street, which is to say this is a street that we will not allow trucks over 2.5 tons to go down. We cannot do that solely. It requires MassDOT to sign off on it. You need to jump through a number of hoops when it comes to presenting them with data on that. And that data, actually, one of the things that we're looking at is can we buy a piece of equipment that gives us that data, and then we never have to deal with the engineers necessarily on it. But another way to go is to hire traffic engineers to come in, do all of that information. The information essentially is good for 5 years for you to pursue those types of things. That's just an example. Obviously, there are others, but that would be just the prime example that comes to mind.
And that can't be written into a contract for you. You were saying that we get the engineer information currently, right? We make them pay for it, and then we get it. So in the contract, we could actually become users of that information, couldn't we? And then we don't have to pay. Therefore, then we don't have to go hire our own. Correct?
Absolutely. So a good example there would be in Hopping Brook, right? There's currently activity which is getting a lot of publicity. So we may have access to essentially say we want this information, which then we have access to and can use, right? In the lowland area, as a separate example, those businesses are pretty well established. There's not a lot that we can do in terms of saying this is what we want you to pay for. There is some activity, and in fact, in the last few years, we do have a count that we can apply to at least one street in that area. But then there are others that we don't have counts for. There's nobody else sort of to pay for it. And if the town wants to pursue that, which there's been quite a bit of resident activity to say that they do, that would be on us to pursue at the moment.
Got it.
Right. I think, Sue, just to be clear, I think he's saying that when a business wants to do something that's going to have traffic implications, we can make them pay for it. But when the town wants to do something that has traffic implications to counteract what may already be there, then we can't. It's on our dime, right? So
yeah, I wasn't quite there at the beginning. I understand that now. I think we should just make sure that any contracts we have, that we write it in, that at the forefront, that we get to get it and use it. And then obviously anything unique after the fact we have to pay for. But okay, thank you. Thanks, Travis.
Okay. So as far as anything beyond that, there's not much. What my plan is for starting our review processes, we'll start talking about it next week, although we'll see how things go because the capital subcommittee is meeting next Wednesday, not tomorrow. So the thought was because of the Jewish holiday, that what we might do is not, as a finance committee, meet next week, let the capital subcommittee meet next Wednesday, and then we would reconvene the following Tuesday, and then our focus of our meeting would be going through all these capital requests in detail and start focusing on recommendations. That also gives us, meaning the town, the opportunity, if there's a change in date, whatever, with town meeting, then we can adjust accordingly. But I'm assuming we're going on the 26th, so we'll be under the gun to kind of do our recommendations in the following 2 weeks. So
could we stay posted, so that
we can? I'm going to leave the posting until I know for sure, right? Until I know for sure. But
could we be posted to attend the select board meeting?
Yeah, I could do that. I could modify our posting next Tuesday to point out that it would be, put the Zoom information for the select board meeting and say it would be a joint meeting with the select board or whatever, or not a joint meeting, but that we will be in attendance as a committee at the select board meeting. So, Dan, you're muted. Yeah.
And then we'll break off to do our own thing.
Right, if we need to, yeah. So kind of like what the governance committee did, right? We will meet together and then we can break off into a separate Zoom if we feel necessary. So, okay. So anything else anybody want to comment on town meeting? Okay, then any other comments anybody wanted to make before we wrap for tonight?
Ken, if that's what you're going to do, can you just let me know? We got to, as we've all now experienced with the governance committee, we got to do 2 sets of sort of, here's our spiel in the beginning kind of thing, and then all that. So let me just plan ahead for that. But
yep, okay, I'll let you know.
Motion to adjourn.
Do I have a second for that?
Second.
Okay, it's not subject to debate, so we'll proceed to a vote. Ms. Zemer.
Aye.
Mr. Maxwell.
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian.
Aye.
Mr. Alfred.
Yes.
Mr. Murphy.
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker.
Yes.
Okay, and I vote yes. So that concludes the Tuesday, September 22nd meeting of the Finance Committee. Thank you for joining us this evening. As you just heard, we will more than likely be meeting at least partially with the select board at the select board meeting next week. but our schedule is a little bit uncertain. But then we'll definitely be meeting the following Tuesday to go through what will hopefully be, a pretty close to final list of things to consider for the fall town meeting. But for tonight, we're done. So thank you and good night.